Welcome to the Spot On Insurance Podcast, brought to you by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Ted Tavares.
And this is Arlene Tavares coming to you from beautiful Puerto Rico. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at a topic that affects every single one of us.
But before we get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And now, here's our host, Doug Foresta.
Welcome. This is Doug Foresta. With me today is Michael Gay. I'm going to say a little bit about Michael and bring him right on. Michael is an insurance program executive with 30 plus years of experience in property and casualty insurance program design, policy form drafting and analysis, underwriting, operations, and management of specialty programs. He is an insurance educator who has written and taught property and casualty courses for 25 plus years. He's the author of course guides and classroom workbooks. He's a risk manager with experience in the identification, analysis, evaluation, and treatment of loss exposures for complex risks. And you can learn more about it at michaelgayconsulting.com. We'll give you some other links as well at the end of the episode. Michael Gay, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Doug. Glad to be with you.
Our topic today is insurance continuing education and why it should be viewed as a helpful tool to make more sales and obtain greater professionalism. And so my first question for you is, in your estimation, what's better or what's best, online or in-person classes?
Doug, it really depends on a person's learning style. I personally prefer in-class because I'm able to interact with the instructor, also able to ask questions, seem to be more engaged, get an opportunity to do group projects, that sort of thing. There are certain classes that lend themselves quite well, however, with the online experience. A lot of it's going to depend on the learner's style, how they best learn. And I, for one, and most people I've talked to, they actually are more engaged if they're in a classroom environment, simply because of that interaction that's available to them. The downside, I think, to the online quite often is if we're not careful, we'll get distracted. We tend to do multitasking, and while we're looking there at the screen, our wife may come in and interrupt us, or if we're doing it at our workplace, the phone may ring and you get interrupted. So if I had to choose between the two, regardless of your style, I would say the best experience is in person where possible.
Thank you. And how about the benefits or the downside of advanced insurance degrees like the CPCU or the CIC? What are your thoughts about that? Well,
I believe in as a holder of, I think now 6 designations, but I believe if you're serious about this business, you have to go beyond your basic licensing education. You really need to dig into it. The best way to accomplish that and the best way to demonstrate that to your clients and others is that you've pursued advanced degrees. No question to me, the pinnacle is the designation CPCU. It's the hardest one to get. It's the most difficult to study for, and it takes quite the commitment. However, I will say in my years of hiring people, if I had candidate A and candidate B, all things being equal, I'm going to opt for the guy with the CPCU or the lady with the CPCU because they have demonstrated to me by going after that degree, they are really serious about this business. I guess it's like going to the doctor.
Right.
You want to go to a doctor who doesn't have a degree or one who does. Maybe the analogy breaks down just a bit. But if you're going to get into complex risk, you really need to have some proficiency that just goes beyond day-to-day education and also pre-licensing courses.
Is there any downside to pursuing advanced insurance degrees?
Well, you'd have to ask your spouse probably. The downside is it does take quite a commitment. It can be expensive. But really the greater downside, and this comes into play sometimes when I'm involved in consulting work in litigation against insurance agents. The downside can be if you have those advanced degrees, it's possible you will be held to a higher standard of professionalism, which makes sense because you have demonstrated that you are more educated or more trained or have specialized knowledge beyond the run-of-the-mill insurance agent. So it can create additional errors and omissions exposures for you if you do not act properly and consistently with the ethics that guide that degree.
Which in a way is kind of also an upside, which means you're held to a higher standard, but you also, as you said, you have a higher standard, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And you'll find many cases, the more sophisticated customer will actually seek out those agents who have the more advanced degrees. And you're bringing to the equation a higher knowledge base. You also gain more respect with your insurance company underwriters because many of those guys are going to have CPCU or other degrees, and it's a camaraderie, it's a fraternity, if you would, or sorority. And there's an evidence there that you've gone beyond and above, and that will get you credibility, perhaps like none other.
I want to back up a minute because I realized one of the things when I asked you about the online and in-person classes, I wanted to make sure to clarify that some states require in-person classes, others actually require online classes. Is that correct?
It is my understanding. Of course, I can speak definitively about North Carolina, where my base license is held. I am licensed in 49 states, but in North Carolina, there is the list of online classes is expanding, and in North Carolina, you can do either. I do understand that some states require solely in person, and some I don't know of any, Doug, that requires solely online. I think it's either in person or a mixture of the two. And one thing else, you cannot repeat classes, continuing ed during your period of qualification period. It depends by state. Most of the time, it's a year, so you cannot repeat a license, a course, the exact same course. Or you can repeat a course that has the same name if it has a different course number, which would mean it would be a different course. So different states do have different requirements. Most of them have either a combination of online and in person, or simply in person. I
know also another thing that I see here that you talk about is the idea that CEs should be viewed as an opportunity and not a burden. Can you say more about that? Absolutely.
Again, my dad used to tell me it's easier to cut things with a sharper knife, and you still may be able to cut it with a dull one, but it's going to be a lot more laborious. I think the opportunity that arises if you pick your courses carefully, take a look at the syllabus and the outline, and just don't take the course to fulfill your continuing education requirement. Actually get in there and read, what is that course about? And it will advance your knowledge. I'm certain that many people in the insurance business do not understand, for example, garage policies the way they should. Certainly all of us struggle with business interruption or construction defect type claims, or what's the difference between claims made and occurrence forms. So there are certain topics that we just may not deal with every day. Emerging areas today is EPLI, employment practices liability, and cyber liability. Those types of courses, if we'll pick those out, that will open doors of opportunity for us when we go sell clients who may have a need or ask about certain coverage types. And you certainly want to know how to speak intelligently about them when a client asks about them.
Spot on Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier insurance licensing experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com. Well, that actually dovetails nicely into my next question for you, which is about this idea of how CEs can give you the opportunity then to, as you say, avoid the lowest price trap. Can you explain what you mean by that lowest price trap and how CEs help to avoid that?
Absolutely. I think selling on price is one of the worst things you can do, because if you sell it on price, you're going to lose it on price. What you should do instead is you should analyze the needs of the customer, regardless of what they're currently buying, and then compare for them their exposures versus how their current policy is addressing those exposures and how you propose to address them. There is no such thing as an apples-to-apples comparison. You can get close, but there really is not. And so if you're going to try to reduce the transaction to the lowest common denominator, which is price, then you're always caught into this trap. Well, what are you going to save me this year? Or the agent down the street has just come in with a quote that's 10% less. Less than what? The challenge to go back is I have the coverages. I've spent the time with you to analyze your risk, and we have designed the policy without regard to the cost. Now, cost is important. You can't be 50% high. necessarily, but there is a premium that a customer will pay for someone who has properly identified the risk. And the only way to do that is to have knowledge about those risks. And unless you're a geek, as I am, that sit around the house and read textbooks and things like that, the only way you're going to gain that knowledge, or the best way to gain that knowledge, is why not do it to fulfill your continuing education requirement?
That's great. And that goes back to the idea that it's an opportunity and not a burden, not just some mandatory thing you need to fulfill.
It should be viewed as an opportunity. I'm an older guy, but I still get excited. Oh boy, this is a chance for me to learn something I don't know, or to learn more about something. Now, I'll give you an example, Doug. Every time I take business interruption, or in fact, I teach business interruption, I learn something even from my own teaching. Sometimes the teacher learns far more than the student.
That's really interesting.
It's a complicated topic, and it's one that I dare say not a handful of agents that I've encountered over the years truly understand the best way to write business interruption, and yet it's one of the greatest exposures that all businesses will face. Yeah,
really, really interesting. So then let's talk about this idea of choosing the correct CE course. Can you say more about this idea? First of all, I guess my first question to you would be, how do I know what the correct CE course is? And then follow up to that is, how does choosing correct CE course help me gain a competitive edge?
Well, I would say look at the environment that you're operating in. If you're at a traditional personal lines agency, and maybe you sell a little bit of small commercial, there's no need to go off and take classes on construction defects for large contractors. You're probably never going to write any. However, there are a plethora of advanced personal lines classes. So if, for example, I sell primarily personal lines, and maybe I want to grow into an area of selling to the professionals who need personal lines, then I want to learn things about nonprofit D&O exposures. I want to learn things about, hey, my kids are down at college campus, at college having beer parties, and how can I be sure I'm properly protected? Or maybe I need to learn more about the marine floaters, or what do I do with my domestic help? All of these things that could come into play based on the environment in which you work. If you work in a large commercial lines agency, the number of topics that you can pursue are almost limitless, limited only by the exposure that your customers are going to have. So I would say play in the arena you're in, or the specialty that you're in. A lot of agencies will choose to concentrate, for example, on home builders, small contractors who build homes. Learn everything you can about them. Learn every exposure they're going to face. How does the builder's risk form work? How does the home buyer work in a builder's risk situation? Do I need flood? Find out all that you can in the niches that you operate. And most agencies today are not just like the old days, they did everything. The really successful ones concentrate on certain segments. I think a big emerging area right now is craft breweries. Everywhere you turn, craft breweries. How much do you know about craft breweries? Well, you may know it at the back end of a glass, but I'm speaking, how much do you know about a brewery and their exposures to loss? And that, if you took some educational courses in an area, that would open up sales opportunities for you to go after craft breweries.
So really, that's a great example of how that CE course and that continuing education really could help me to get a competitive edge and make more sales.
Absolutely. And again, it is an attitude change. We as an industry have to quit looking at it as, well, it's just a way to raise money for the instructors and a way to raise money for the state. And, I've got to do it, so I might as well just get it done as quickly as I can. No, let's change the attitude. If you've got to do it, which you should be doing it regardless, but if you have to do it, let's learn something from it. And if you don't like the instructor you go to, find one you do.
Well, that was going to be my next question to you. Yeah. How do I find the right course provider? Do you have any advice for us about that?
I do. Of course, every Department of Insurance has a list of approved providers. That's probably not the best place to start. Because it's not overly difficult unless you're a horrible provider and you get written up. It's not overly difficult to get approved and to continue to be approved. Probably your best sources are go to your independent agency networks or independent association of brokers and look in their course, look at the ones they've approved, or call your education coordinator at your associations and ask around. Another great source is if you interact with restoration companies who come in and do fire cleanup and water damage restoration. These guys have started offering free continuing education to their agents as a way of marketing to these agencies. And the quality of those guys are quite good. Your claims, even if you're not an adjuster, your claims associations tend to have some of the very best instructors because they're speaking at it from a technical standpoint. So that's how I would go about it. I'd look at their experience. In my case, I have 25 plus years. Ask for some recommendations if you're considering a course, especially one that's expensive. Organizations like IRMI, International Risk Management Institute, they have phenomenal, through Jack Gibson, he has done a great job. They have phenomenal continuing education classes, both independently, online, in person, as well as their annual conventions. So there's a whole host of ways to find great instructors. Look for the guys that have been around a while and have taught for a long time. And again, it doesn't always mean they're good, but if you'll look and see if the instructor has some advanced degrees himself, that's a pretty good clue he's committed to the business.
My guest today has been Michael Gay. We've been talking about continuing education and really a mindset shift that can really help you with getting the most out of continuing education. Michael, thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about you, I know I gave a brief link at the beginning, but how can people reach you and learn more about you?
Best way to learn about me, in addition to my corporate responsibilities, I have an independent consulting company, michaelgayconsulting.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn very easily. My profile's at Michael W. Gay, or just go into the search bar in LinkedIn and I'll pop right up.
Michael Gay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Doug.
Direct your podcast questions to iask@soyteam.com. Share this podcast with your friends and remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
As always, thanks for joining us. And please remember, we'll be answering this week's podcast questions at Spot On Insurance Facebook Live, Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern.